These are the lecture notes from Chapter 18 slides, and we're starting with slide number 27. Remember the renal, that shouldn't say capsule, that should say corpuscle. The renal corpuscle contains the glomerulus and the glomerular capsule. The glomerulus is composed of capillaries, and so if you remember, capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, and so they're formed from endothelial cells, which are simple squamous epithelial tissue, but just a single layer of what we call endothelium. And the pores in the glomerular capillaries, or glomerulus, are called fenestrations. Then there's the glomerular capsule, which is the cup that collects the blood that's filtered. And the cells in the layer formed by the glomerular capsule that contacts the glomerulus are called, the cells are called podocytes because they have these little foot processes called pedicels, and the combination of the pedicels and the fenestrations create filtration slits. So the filtration membrane is composed of the glomerular capillaries, the basement membrane of both the capillaries and the basement membrane that comes from the glomerular capsule. And then the filtration slits between the podocyte processes. So these three structures together are known as the filtration membrane. Mainly what occurs in the PCT is reabsorption, and reabsorption refers to materials that are in the filtrate going back into the blood. So some of the stuff that re-enters the blood that was filtered out are like important nutrients like glucose and amino acids. Some plasma proteins that were small enough to be filtered out in the first place, and then ions, sodium, potassium, chloride ions, calcium ions, that kind of thing. And then most of the water from the filtrate is reabsorbed at the PCT. Now, in the nephron loop, the main purpose of the nephron loop is to concentrate the urine, but what happens in the descending limb of the nephron loop is that the descending limb is permeable to water but not solutes. So as filtrate moves down the descending limb, it becomes more concentrated. Then as it goes up the ascending limb, it's opposite. In the ascending limb, the ascending limb is not permeable to water, so it keeps water inside, but it transports sodium and chloride ions out of the tubule. So, as the filtrate moves up the ascending limb, it becomes less concentrated. But the result of this whole process is a very high solute concentration in the peritubular fluid of the renal medulla. So it's just the whole process helps to concentrate the urine. It's a difficult process to understand, but I do want you to know that in the descending limb, water moves out of the nephron and solutes stay in, and the urine becomes more concentrated. And the ascending limb, it's the opposite. Water can't leave because the ascending limb, cells of the ascending limb are not permeable to water. They're impermeable to water, but they're pumping salts out, sodium and chloride ions out. So the urine is becoming less concentrated or more dilute. But the overall purpose is to concentrate the urine. All right, in the DCT, there are three processes. First, there's the secretion of ions, acids, and drugs and toxins from the blood ending up in the urine for different reasons, but it's some of that reason is to adjust the pH. There's the selective reabsorption of sodium back into the blood, and the selective reabsorption of water back into the blood. So in that case, it's going to be dependent on things like your blood pressure and your blood volume, and helps to I guess your urinary system kind of makes a decision at this point at the level of the DCT, whether or not to concentrate the urine even more or to make it more diluted, and that has to do a lot with the composition of your blood. All right, now the juxtaglomerular complex. I showed you this earlier. The cells of the macula densa and the cells of the juxtaglomerular cells regulate blood volume and blood pressure by secreting EPO, erythropoietin, which will increase the production of red blood cells, and renin. So damage to which part of the nephron would interfere with the hormonal control of blood pressure? Well, I mean, the DCT, because ADH acts on the DCT to create a larger volume of urine to cause you to keep a larger volume of fluid in your urine, so you urinate more, basically. So I guess that would be the DCT. Yeah, it'd be the DCT. All right, the waste in the urine are urea, creatinine, and uric acid. Some normal values in the urine, sodium and potassium levels can vary, chloride, bicarbonate, but definitely you want to have almost zero glucose, lipids, and proteins. Very, very small amount of amino acids. And then, okay, for filtration pressure, blood pressure is what helps maintain the filtration pressure in the kidneys. So if the blood pressure is too low, serious loss of systemic blood pressure can result in loss of filtration and kidney failure, renal failure. The GFR is the glomerular filtration rate, and that is defined as the amount of filtrate produced in the kidneys per minute. The average GFR is 125 milliliters per minute, or 180 liters per day, which is incredible when you think about how many 2-liter drink bottles that is. That's 90 2-liter drink bottles that are filtered through the kidneys per day. Over 99% of the filtrate is actually reabsorbed in the renal tubules. And most of that is at the level of the PCT. Okay, so at the PCT, 60 to 70% of the filtrate is reabsorbed back into the blood. So 60 to 70% of what was filtered out of the blood is now put back into the blood. All of the glucose, all of the amino acids, and other organic nutrients, I guess like fatty acids, are reabsorbed back into the blood because we need those. They're nutrients for a reason. Our cells need those. And then there's active reabsorption of ions like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, bicarbonate, phosphate, sulfate. Some of this is regulated by hormones. For example, parathyroid hormone produced by the parathyroid glands affects calcium reabsorption. And there is some active secretion in the PCT, for example, hydrogen ions, but mostly we see that occurring in the DCT. Now, the nephron loop really just creates a concentration gradient in the medulla. It just concentrates the urine, and that's probably good enough for what we need to know about the nephron loop.
At the DCT makes final adjustments to the tubular fluid. It's called, at the DCT, we call it tubular fluid instead of filtrate. And so, for example, the active transport of sodium out of the tubular fluid exchanged for potassium or hydrogen ions can help regulate the pH of the blood. This active transport of sodium is increased in the presence of aldosterone. The overall effect is that the blood sodium level increases while the blood potassium level decreases. And the purpose is to counteract low blood sodium or high blood calcium levels. So that's just one example. In the absence of ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, it's also known as vasopressin. In the absence, the urine will be diluted. It will be a large volume of very dilute urine. But in the presence of ADH, the DCT will concentrate the urine. And one of the things that leads to ADH production, and it is produced and released by it's produced by the hypothalamus and released by the pituitary gland. But if you're dehydrated, you will have ADH production will increase, and that will cause your urine to concentrate so that you are saving more of body fluids in your blood, and not releasing it as urine. All right, you can see in these illustrations what happens when ADH is present. When ADH is not present, you have water leaving the descending limb. I like this because it also kind of shows you what happens in the nephron loop. And then you have water staying in and sodium and chloride ions leaving the descending limb. So you end up with a less concentrated urine at the top, highly concentrated urine at the bottom of the loop, less concentrated at the top when it enters the DCT, and so you're going to void or release a large volume of dilute urine. And this is when you are not dehydrated and your body is not producing, is not releasing ADH. But in the presence of ADH, water leaves the DCT and the collecting duct. And so the urine is concentrated and you release a small volume of concentrated urine. All right, this is a summary of kidney function, and I'm just going to start here that filtration occurs in the renal corpuscle. You can see the part of the renal corpuscle called the glomerular capsule, and then this is representing, the red is representing the glomerulus, which is the network of capillaries. So filtration occurs here. Almost everything is filtered out of the blood, and then at the level of the PCT, almost all of that, 60 to 70% of what was filtered out, is reabsorbed back into the blood, especially nutrients like glucose and amino acids and certain ions. Then you have the descending limb of the nephron loop where water leaves but solutes stay, and the urine becomes more and more concentrated toward the bottom. And then in the ascending limb, the urine becomes less concentrated because water remains inside the loop and sodium and chloride ions are pumped out. Then you have the DCT, which is involved in the final adjustments that are made to the urine. And then you have collecting duct, the papillary duct, and that leads to the minor calyx. Then for properties of normal urine, it's a little more dense than water. Water has a specific gravity of 1 even, and urine is a little bit more dense than water. The pH can be anywhere from 4.5 to 8. The average is around 6, which is slightly acidic, but not strongly acidic. It's about 93 to 97% water, and the color should be clear yellow. No bacteria should be in the urine.
Okay, for checkpoint questions, a decrease in blood pressure would have what effect on the GFR? It would decrease the GFR because increase in blood pressure would increase GFR. They're directly related to one another. And what effect would low circulating levels of ADH have on urine production? You would release a large volume of dilute urine.